EVO. Water finds its way in. It doesn't have to go through walls or find its way through windows. It finds its way in through time, through stone, through the spaces between things that look sealed but really aren't. Water's patient in a way that nothing else is patient. It doesn't force. It waits. It finds the hairline crack, the loose seal, the threshold that looks solid from the outside. Sara woke up, she claims, at 2:47 in the morning. She knew the time because she checked her phone, the way you do when something wakes you without making a sound. But the cabin was quiet. The lake outside was quiet. The only thing she could hear was the slow tick of the wooden walls cooling in the August dark. She put her feet on the floor, and it was like she was stepping into a puddle. Welcome back to The Devil Within. This is part 2 of Something in the Water, our 3-part case file from Table Rock Lake, Missouri, the summer of 2010. The campfire's raging. Thanks for joining us. If this is your first time, go back and start with part 1, because this story builds. You'll want the foundation before we pour the water. And subscribe if you haven't, share if you're feeling generous, and leave us a review if the show has gotten into your head, because that, honestly, is the whole point. So let's continue. Chapter 1. The Bedroom Floor. According to Sara, the pool of water on her bedroom floor was roughly 18 inches across. It was still, it was dark, the way that water in a container goes dark when there's no light source below it. And remember, no plumbing ran through that room. There was no pipes to leak, there was no radiator, nothing that could form this pool of water. The window was closed, the ceiling was dry, nothing was dripping, the walls were dry. The water was just there. Sara stood at the edge of it for what she later described as a very long time. Not long by the clock, maybe, but long in that particular way that moments stretch when you're looking at something that has no business existing. She called for the others, and all 5 of them stood around it in the dark. Nobody touched it, and nobody spoke for a while. Then one of them said what everyone was thinking. It looked like something had come out of the water and stood in that spot, right there in the middle of the room, watching Sara sleep, and then left. And the word stood actually is wrong, because whatever it was wasn't something that stands. Not exactly. But the shape of the pool, wider in the center, tapering at 2 ends, had a quality that was hard to shake. According to the account, Sara's was the only bedroom where the water appeared. Sara was the one who had been touched beneath the surface of the water. They dried the floor with towels, and then nobody went back to sleep. They sat on the porch and watched the dock light make its small yellow circle on the water, and the water was still, and whatever was beneath it was either gone or very good at being quiet. By morning, they had a decision to make. Chapter 2. The name. So 4 of the group voted to leave. Sara wasn't one of them. She voted to stay. And that's the part of the story that takes a moment to just sit with. She was the one who'd been touched beneath the surface of the water. She was the one who'd seen the shape beneath the dock light. She was the one who'd woken up to a pool of cold water on her floor. And she was also one of the ones that wanted to stay. She couldn't explain it then. She tried to explain it later, and the best she could do was this. It just didn't feel like a threat. Okay, not to her maybe. To her it felt like a tension. And there's a difference, she said, between something that wants to harm you and something that has just noticed you. She understood, standing on that porch in the early August morning, that she had been noticed. That whatever was in the lake had looked at all 6 of them and chosen her specifically. And she wanted to know why. And this is where I have to pause and tell you something about the history of this water. So, the Osage, the people of the Middle Waters, they had a name for what lived in the rivers and the lakes of this region. And not just the single name that I mentioned in the last episode, because naming a power too precisely is its own kind of danger, according to the Osage. But the closest translation across the languages of the tribes who shared this watershed, like I mentioned, is the Underwater Panther. It first appears in the written record in 1673 when Jacques Marquette traveled the Mississippi and described enormous images painted on river bluffs. That creature with the body of a great cat and the tail of a mighty serpent, occasionally the horns of a bull. His journal entry was careful, almost reverent. He noted that even the finest painters in France could not have produced what he saw on those cliffs. Archaeologists have since identified similar imagery across hundreds of Mississippi ceremonial sites, distributed through river systems, including the White River, the river that now feeds Table Rock Lake. And the Underwater Panther wasn't random. Every tradition that carries this figure agrees on one thing. It chose, it selected. It was drawn to particular people for particular reasons that didn't always make sense to the people it chose. And here's the other thing. It didn't stop at the water's edge. The traditions are consistent on this point too. The Underwater Panther could move between worlds, between water and land, between night and day, between the visible and the unseen. Its interest in a person didn't end when that person climbed out of the lake. The next morning, everyone left except Sara. She stayed one more night all by herself. She left all the lights on. She left the porch door open. She sat in the chair by the window that faced the water, and she waited, though she couldn't have said what she was waiting for. And sometime around 3:30, 4 in the morning, she fell asleep. When she woke up, there was no pool of water on the floor this time. But the towels they'd used the night before, the ones they'd stacked by the front door, the towels had been moved. And they were folded neatly on the end of her bed. The poet Mary Oliver wrote, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" I think about that line in the context of this case, and I think Oliver was asking it as an invitation. But some things, some very old things, things that have been in the water since long before we named the water, they ask it as something else. To them, it's not an invitation. It's a question with weight behind it. A question that lands differently when it comes from the cold side of the dark. Sara left Table Rock Lake on the morning of day 6. She checked the bedroom floor before she left. She checked those towels. She walked to the end of the dock and stood there for a few minutes, looking at the water, looking at the place 20 yards out where the bottom drops from green to black. She'd say later that the water was still. And then she added that still isn't the same thing as empty. Next, on the final episode of Something in the Water, what Sara reported in the months after leaving Table Rock, what the local dive community knows about the eastern cove where the cabin sits, and the question that's been underneath this story all along. Does the Underwater Panther take something with it, or does it leave something behind? That's next on part 3.